when. Te, your. Moha, of illusion. Kalilam, dense forest. Buddhi, transcendental service with intelligence. Yat surpasses. Tada, at that time. Ganta asi, you shall go. Nirvedam, callousness. Shrotavyasya, toward all that is to be heard. Shrutasya, all that is already heard. Cha, also. So translation. When your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. So purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. There are many examples, many good examples in the lives of the great devotees of the Lord, of those who became indifferent to the rituals of the Vedas simply by devotional service to the Lord. When a person factually understands Krishna and his relationship with Krishna, he naturally becomes indifferent to the rituals of fruitive activities. Even though an experienced brahmana, Sri Madhavendra Puri, a great devotee and acharya in the line of the devotees, says, Sanjavanana Bhadramastu Bhavato Bho Snana Tupyam Namo Bodeva Pitarascha Tarpana Vido Naham Kshamaksham Yatam Yatra Kvapi Nishadya Yadavako Totamasya Kamsadrishaha Smaram Smaram Magam Harami Taralam Manye Kim Anye Name. O my prayers 3 times a day, all glory to you. O bathing, I offer my obeisances unto you. O demigods, O forefathers, please excuse me for my inability to offer you my respects. Now, wherever I sit, I can remember the great descendant of the Yadu dynasty, Krishna, the enemy of Kamsa, and thereby I can free myself from all sinful bondage. I think this is sufficient for me. The Vedic rites and rituals are imperative for neophytes, comprehending all kinds of prayer 3 times a day, taking a bath early in the morning, offering respects to the forefathers, etc. But when one is fully in Krishna consciousness, I'll read that again, so you don't take this out of context. But when one is fully in Krishna consciousness, anybody here fully in Krishna consciousness?
Yeah,
Trying, but is anyone right now fully in Krishna consciousness? Raise your hand. And is engaged in his transcendental loving service, one becomes indifferent to all these regulative principles because he has already attained perfection. If one can reach the platform of understanding by service to the Supreme Lord Krishna, he has no longer to execute different types of penances and sacrifices as recommended in revealed scriptures. And similarly, if one has not understood that the purpose of the Vedas is to reach Krishna and simply engages in the rituals, etc., then he is uselessly wasting time in such engagements. Persons in Krishna consciousness transcend the limit of Shabda Brahma, or the range of the Vedas and Upanishads. So yadate moha kalilam buddhir vyatet rishyate tadagantasi nirvedam shrotavyasya shrutasya cha. So, obviously, or not so obviously, this particular verse, which talks about not being subject to the injunctions of many of the Vedic literatures, is in reference to one of Arjuna's objections in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, why he didn't want to fight. Actually, several of Arjuna's injunctions. such as not killing family members, leaving the ladies unprotected. So Arjuna was definitely giving Vedic excuses. And so here Krishna is actually saying these Vedic excuses are not such good excuses. And this is also very much in line with another verse in the Bhagavad Gita. Trigunya Vishaya Veda Nidis Trigunya Bhavarjana Nirdwandvo Netrasapasto Niryogakshema Atmavan, which states that the Vedic literatures are mainly dealing with what? Trigunya, with the three modes of material nature. Therefore, Arjuna, you should rise above these injunctions and be established in the self. Okay, so let's start this discussion off by talking about what is Vedic, because that's a big discussion and it's gone around a little bit controversial. If you actually go by the scholar's definition of what is Vedic, they will refer you to the four Vedas, like the Rig, Sama, Atharva, Yajur Veda. And of course, the Rig Veda is the Veda of hymns, which basically, if you count up all the hymns, it's mostly Indra you're worshipping. Although, there's some interesting information in the Rig Veda which states, Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Pada Pashanti Yat Surya, that all the demigods there are looking to Vishnu. So that's the Rig Veda. Sama Veda is the Veda of hymns. Yajur Veda is the Veda of swahas. You understand? Fire sacrifices. Swaha, Yajur, very much into sacrifices. And Atharva Veda is an interesting Veda. It's sometimes it's considered that there are three original Vedas and sometimes four original. The Atharva Veda contains different things like mantras to do magical things, like curse people. Like if you want to curse people, you go to refer to the Atharva Veda. Of course, don't investigate the Atharva Veda with the intention of cursing people, because it's not going to work. Because for a mantra to work, you have to be initiated in a mantra. Even like the original Vedic mantras, you have to be initiated. Sampradaya vinay mantras te nishpala mataha. The Hare Krishna mantra works because Lord Chaitanya has initiated all of us. That doesn't mean you don't have to take initiation. You still have to take initiation. But Lord Chaitanya has basically given everyone permission to chant Hare Krishna. And actually Lord Chaitanya's initiation process was quite easy. Like when he confronted the Buddhists who tried to defame him by offering him a plate of untouchable food in the name of Mahaprasadam. He arranged that a big bird would pick up the plate of untouchable food and drop it on the head of the chief Buddhist, knock him unconscious, and all the other Buddhists ran to Lord Chaitanya asking him what we should do. And Lord Chaitanya responded, chant Hare Krishna, and that way he initiated them. No fire sacrifice, no swaha, no smoke gets in your eyes, no recommendation from the temple president, nothing. And then, pretty easy in those days to get initiated. Even when you're trying to offend Lord Chaitanya, you get initiated. So then what happened is he told them to chant Hare Krishna in the ear of the chief Buddhist monk, and they did that, and they initiated the chief Buddhist monk. So, double initiation that day. The disciple became the next guru. Pretty good. Wasn't ISKCON, but it worked. So, as far as the Hare Krishna mantra, it doesn't, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita it says, doesn't wait for initiation. So you can chant right away. Nobody's stopping. You can have neck beads right away. Although, in our tradition, many years ago, one didn't wear neck beads until they got initiated. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, you see pictures of him without neck beads, that's before he got initiated. Wow, or japa beads too. But Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur were very kind. So, anyway, so it's not going to work if you chant the hymns of the Atharva Veda. or any of the Vedas without initiation. So generally when they talk about Vedic, that's what the scholars mean. You know, the four original Vedas, and sometimes they may include the Upanishads. And then after, what?
Aranyakas.
Yeah, Aranyakas, oh, they're the forest literatures. They're the forest literature. Aranya means the woods. You understand? The forest literature, which is interesting. That's an interesting story behind that. Glad you brought up those literatures. That's because people became so fried with the Brahmins that the intelligent people ran to the forest, and they composed these literatures called the Aranyakas, or the forest literatures. Interesting, Aranya. Also, it's described by Chanakya Pandit, yata aranyam yata graham. That, should I give the translation of that verse? You don't know the verse. He says, oh my God, I shouldn't mention it. Anyway, so he says that Chanakya Pandit says, if your wife doesn't speak pleasingly, run to the forest. That's where the Aranya is used. Yata aranyam yata graham, because your house is already like the forest. So therefore you should go to the forest anyway, you know, so it makes a spiritual advancement. Anyway, that's a sannyas advertisement. So, yata aranyam yata graham. So anyway, so then of course after that we have the Vedanta Sutras, the Itihasas, the Puranas, which are definitely by the scholars not considered the Vedas. Although in the original Vedas you have the statement, what? Itihasa Purananam Panchama Veda Uchate. That there's actually a fifth Veda, Pancha, which is the Mahabharata, which is one of the Itihasas, and then the Puranas, the 18 main Puranas, and there's so many secondary Puranas. So, anyway, so there's different meanings of the word Veda. But primarily, when we talk about something that's Vedic, it means something that comes, when we talk about it, something comes from the Shruti or the Smriti literature, and also from the Pancharatriki literature. Pancharatriki literature is the Vedic, like tantric literature, which is interesting. Those of you who have ever heard the word tantric, you think that means someone who eats out of a skull and does black magic, but there's right-handed tantric and left-handed tantric. Everybody's heard of the tantric. You call someone a tantric. So left-handed tantric is when you do eat out of a skull, do all sorts of disgusting things. Left-handed tantric people have panchamakara. They have 5 regulative principles instead of 4, which is nice. One regulative, see if I remember them all. One regulative principle is called matsya. Means you got to eat fish. In other words, they have opposite regulative principles than we have. Matsya, mamsa, you got to eat meat too. You got to do these things. Mudra, you got to make disgusting, anyway, signs with your hand. I think you understand what I'm talking about. Mada, you have to drink alcohol. At that time, I guess they also had marijuana in those days. That's a tradition from India. Actually, Prabhupada said the reason people take marijuana in the Western world is because it came from India. So it's not that everything that comes from India is Vedic and nice. People think, oh, it's Indian. Sometimes you get these oils from India. They say, oh, it's from India. But they mix the oil with motor oil, for the deities. It's just like, this is pure sandalwood oil. So, wow. And it's not. Anyway.
I heard they mix incense with rubber.
Yeah, they do. They mix. Anyway, it's not always, not that everything comes from India. It's not. But they said this is Vedic sandalwood oil. So then the word Veda becomes expanded to mean anything that comes from India. Like, anyway, here's my favorite one. Like calling old ladies Mataji. Incidentally, that's Hindi, not Sanskrit, in case you didn't know. And it's not, that word is not there. Actually, in the Sanskrit, it's called Mata. So instead of using the word Mataji to refer to ladies, you'd say Mata. And then the ladies can refer to you as Pita. And we had one of my friends is so much attached to these designations like Mataji and Pitaji. She calls her husband Pitaji. I say, how's your husband doing? She says, well, Pitaji is doing very nice. not very intelligent. So, she must be, are you married to your husband? Married to your father? A very good idea. So, anyway, so we confuse a lot of things with Vedic that actually aren't Vedic. Like many years ago, there was a discussion about the design of the Temple of Vedic Planetarium. I don't know if any of you remember that. Like the big discussion about the design. It's because Prabhupada originally wanted a design more or less like it is now. Prabhupada said, look at the Capitol in the U.S., United States, he wanted a building like that. So the devotees designed something like that, and then there was such an uproar and confusion all over the movement. It's not Vedic. And so everyone started to look at all the different temples in India. And incidentally, there's very few temples in India, especially in the north, that are more than 200, 300, 400, 500 years old, max. And incidentally, in case you couldn't figure it out, India has been a captive, or was a captive country, since the beginning of the first millennium. The year zero of the Christian era. You understand? So India has had an influx of foreign architecture brought in. Many things you may consider Vedic with the domes and everything like that. You can go into the Middle East and see similar buildings like that. So what is Vedic? Because this word Vedic is just bandied about. And certainly then it's often put together with Vedic culture or Vedic instruments, right? The harmonium is a nice Vedic instrument? No. Actually, a flute is a Vedic instrument. I could say that for sure because one of my friends plays the flute and he lived over 5,000 years ago. He's in his recent appearances on the altar, but Lord Chaitanya did not play the flute, except maybe in private or something like that. So what is Vedic? What is not Vedic?
There's also some things come from the Dantic traditions that may not have the source in.
Yeah, and actually even it's been traced that a lot of the Ayurvedic literature is only several hundred years old. People say, well, it's traditional, it's Ayurveda, taught by Dhanvantari, who came out, the churning of the milk ocean, and he wrote it. No, he didn't write it. There's a lot of traditional stuff and traditions are really interesting too. Like Prabhupada tells a story about traditions. He says, once upon a time, there was a man who was doing a fire sacrifice and he had a cat. Some of you have heard this story before. And the cat kept jumping into trying to get too close to the fire. You don't want a cat to catch fire. And so that Brahmin, he took the cat, whenever he was doing a fire sacrifice, and tied it to a tree or a pole. And his disciples saw that and said, Guru Maharaj does this. They wrote it down in the Archana Padati at that point, the book of rituals. And from then on, it was written down. It said, okay, at this part of the procedure, after the Sankalpa, you find a cat, and you tie the cat up to a stick or a tree or something like that. until the sacrifice is over. And so it became Vedic, a tradition. So you have all this Vedic stuff. Yeah, anyway, that's it. Enough said to get me in trouble, because I can go into dhotis and everything too, but I'm not going to go into dhotis. Sorry, ladies covering their heads. You know, I can get into the whole thing, but I'll get in trouble and never be invited back. So, because this is a traditional temple. So anyway, on the other hand, what Krishna is referring to here is bona fide Vedic injunctions that Arjuna was giving as an excuse. And because Arjuna was transcendental to all those Vedic injunctions, the secondary Vedic injunctions, and because Krishna knew the purpose of the Vedas, which he later makes very clear in the 15th chapter, text 15, isn't it? By all the Vedas I am to be known. You know, when you understand the purpose of something, you can adjust some of the details to achieve the purpose. You have to be able to distinguish between the principles and the details. And one example given in the Mahabharata, which I use quite often, is grandfather Bhishma being very attached to keeping his word. Right? So grandfather Bhishma, those who don't know the Mahabharata, made a promise when he was getting his father's second wife. His father was very attached to this lady, Satyavati. And Satyavati's father, Satyavati, made the condition that, this is Shantanu, was very attached, that Shantanu could only marry her if her son became the next king. And Bhishma, in order to please his father, because his father was completely depressed that he couldn't marry this girl. He was completely madly in love, Vipralamba Seva. Actually, it's amazing how people fall in love. Sometimes it shocks me. Isn't it? There's even a song in Italian, when the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore. You heard it? Yeah, sometimes I cite that song. So Shantanu was madly in love with her, as he was previously with Ganga Devi. And because he was in love with her, he went into a big depression, and Bhishma, Bhishma went and he got the girl for his father, promising that he would not become the next king and that he wouldn't even have children, so there would be no trouble with his offspring wanting to become the next king. So that's a promise. In the Vedic literatures, promises are very important. You know, just like we hear, even in the Bhagavad Gita, the austerities of speech. What are they? Anybody know? Sacha Priya Hitam. Right? Speaking truthfully. Beneficially. Right? Pleasingly. And what? Regularly reciting the Vedic literatures. Those are the austerities of speech. So Vedas do, even the Bhagavad Gita tells us that we should speak truthfully. Okay, someone who took a vow, spoke truthfully, and then he stuck to his vow. And he was thinking, this is a higher principle, when actually it was a detail. It's a higher principle. And it was such a higher principle for him that when there was the attempted disrobing of Draupadi, he said, I have to stick to my promise. If this lady gets defiled or disrobed, tortured, I have to stick to my promise. I don't like it, but I made a promise. It's Vedic. It was. Actually, in that case, it is Vedic. It was Vedic. And continues to be Vedic that you should stick to your promises. However, there was a consequence to that. That a religion became prominent. A lady became defiled because of that. Or attempted to be defiled. And basically the whole dynasty had to be destroyed because of Bhishma sticking to a Vedic promise. Interesting. Because he didn't understand the purpose behind the promise. Ultimately, he did understand when it was too late. He understood when he was lying on his back on a bed of arrows. Then he said, whoops. And he said, yes, now I understand. And he gave the example, an interesting example he gave. He said, just like how one can sometimes break his promise or tell a lie, he said, just like a bunch of dacoits are attacking a family, and the family takes shelter in the ashram of a great sage. The great sage has promised never to tell a lie. And the dacoits come and they ask the great sage, where is this family? And the great sage says, I cannot tell a lie. They're in there, and they get killed by the dacoits. So, in other words, one determines the dharmic quality of something, or even the Vedic, if you want to use that, Veda in the sense of knowledge, or Vedantic. Let's use the word Vedantic, because it means the conclusion of knowledge, even though it sometimes refers to the Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta, the Vedantic principle is that something is determined by the results. Very interesting. Of course, the Sanskrit for that is palena padachiyate. Does anyone know what that means? Palena padachiyate. You judge something by the fruits. In other words, that's one of the reasons that we know the Krishna consciousness works, because when we chant, we feel happy. When we see other people chant, we see their lives become transformed, good qualities become manifest, yasyasti bhakti, bhagavacha kinchana, sara gunas tatra samasate sara, that when one engages in devotional service, they become saintly. Just like all of you who are engaged in devotional service, you're all saintly, regardless of what you were doing before. You can, even if you were hippies before, anybody here was a hippie? Now you become happies. Prabhupada said that's a miracle. Not producing like some bogus guru producing what, ashes from his ears or something like that.
Golden egg from his mouth.
Yeah. Shiva Linga from his mouth. That's not the real magic. Prabhupada said transformation, like it's described like bell metal by the process of initiation or process of chanting. Then one's consciousness becomes changed to Krishna consciousness, like the bell metal can be made from, not bell metal, gold could be made from bell metal. So that's the example given by Srila Rupa Goswami. So one has to consider the results of something. And therefore, Rupa Goswami makes it very clear that the first rule of devotional service is to always remember Krishna. And second rule is never forget Krishna. Like that. So, of course, we don't have the right to adjust the regulative principles by saying, I remember Krishna more when I smoke marijuana. That's not really the point that I'm making. But we have to understand what are actually principles of devotional service and what are details in devotional service. And sometimes, like in the case of Srila Prabhupada, who crossed an ocean, violating the detail of a sannyasi never crossing ocean, or a sannyasi wearing, sannyasi not supposed to even wear sewn clothing. If you go into the Bhagavatam, those of you who are brahmacharis, you have two options as far as your dress. Depending on the scripture, you either wear deerskin, tree bark, or you go naked. So it's a little cold for the naked business here. But so those are your options. I'm sorry, that's Vedic. Read the Bhagavatam, Vanaprastha is tree bark also. And sannyasis, we'll take questions later. But sannyasis, also, naked sannyasis. I ain't coming here in the winter. So, and there's Bhagavatam says this. Oh my God. That, sannyasa, so many rules and regulations for sannyasa. Who would take sannyas? No Mahaprasadam. Actually, Prabhupada one time said, Mahaprasadam is for the grahastas, not for the sannyasis. So a lot of people get married just to eat, take Mahaprasadam. So in other words, so you see Prabhupada did so many things in addition to crossing the ocean. And it's also said that if you see the face of a non-devotee, what are you supposed to do? Does anyone know the injunction? Jump in the Ganges without even changing your clothes. So that's why I always travel around with some Ganges water in a spray bottle. So whenever I see anyone, I just spray myself to purify myself. So therefore, how do we know? Okay, so the question is, how do we know which injunctions we follow, which injunctions we don't? That's why we have Srila Prabhupada, our Acharya. That's what Acharya means, example. Because Srila Prabhupada is an absolutely pure devotee. He's on the level of pure devotional service, which means he definitely doesn't have to follow any of these rules and regulations. He doesn't. Because he's, as stated here in Prabhupada's purport, but when one is fully in Krishna consciousness and is engaged in his transcendental loving service, one becomes indifferent to all these regulated principles. So Prabhupada doesn't have to, but then it explains in the Gita why Prabhupada does. Yad yada charati shrestas tatat evetaro janaha, isn't it? As the great personality of Acharya acts, then everyone follows. So Prabhupada said elsewhere, and also Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says elsewhere, even if one is an absolutely pure devotee of the Lord, then he acts very strictly following the rules and regulations, like the sadhana process. Even if one is on the platform of raganuga means everything spontaneous, then still he acts like a sadhaka, a new sadhaka, to set an example for others. Otherwise, people are going to, like Prabhupada, of course, there was that funny example we were talking to someone the other day about, that one time Prabhupada drank some soft drink, which is called 7-Up, for his health. And then a few days later, they were delivering a whole truckload of 7-Up to the temple, not for Prabhupada, but for all the brahmacharis and brahmacharinis, Beyond like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they were drinking cans or bottles of 7-Up. So one who's in a position of authority has, as a very important duty, to set a good example and act as if he is not on the highest level of devotional service. Very, very important. One time I was speaking to one of my godbrothers who wasn't so strict in his sadhana, and I said, isn't it important you get up in the morning and show a good example? He says, isn't there any place in the movement for spontaneous devotees? I said, if you want to be a leader, yeah, there's a place. If you go to the Himalayas, you can be very spontaneous because nobody's going to follow you. But nowadays they have internet even in the Himalayas. Someone will come up there with a cell phone and take a picture of you. So, but if one wants to be a leader, and actually Prabhupada wanted us all to be leaders, then we have to set examples for others, even if we don't have to rise early. What I'm talking about is not the 4 regulated principles, but even if we don't have to rise early. And actually there was one Babaji, Bamsidas Babaji, who apparently took other things like tobacco and everything. You know Bamsidas Babaji. And so he was definitely an avadutta. Avadutta means like the wind, someone who just has no rules and regulations to follow. So it is our duty, anyway, so it's our duty to actually set a good example and follow, in many cases, secondary Vedic injunctions if they don't interfere with Krishna consciousness. So how do we know? We follow the example of Prabhupada, getting back to the point. We follow Srila Prabhupada's example. And also, not just the physical, external example, which we have to study Prabhupada's life to find out, but Prabhupada's example of priorities. Prabhupada's setting priorities in the Krishna conscious movement. Preaching is the essence, books are the basis, utility is the principle, and purity is the force. And this is, to me, that's Prabhupada's, that's 4 regulated principles Prabhupada gave. And Prabhupada, he was very much concerned with the amount of devotees joining the Krishna consciousness movement, very much concerned with compassion. And these are the sort of examples that we have in a Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada, from time to time, would adjust certain external things to preach Krishna consciousness. So, anyway, so these are some of the points here. So any questions or comments? Yes?
Thanks, Mary. I have one question. I was reading Srimad Bhagavatam 11 Canto.
Right.
And according you speak about the flaws of the worshipping. And I was reading Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a place where Krishna said that my devotees, they are worshipping me in 3 floors: Vedic, Tantric, and mixed ones. So always I ask myself, that mix they put there, what is that mix is? Worshipping Krishna in mixed one.
Well, people, I got to refer to that particular verse, but devotees who are not yet pure, absolutely pure, they have mixed motivations. Let's take the demigods, for example. The other day I was having a discussion with someone, and I made the point that the demigods are prisoners too in this material world. She became shocked when she heard that. And she said, why? Why do you consider them prisoners? They're devotees. Well, I said they're subcommon devotees. They have some desire, and they're also prisoners of the 3 modes of material nature. Prabhupada said, comparing the demigods to, there's a word in English for a type of prisoners called trustees. Now, trustee means a prisoner who is given more trust in the prison house, so he has more freedom, so he may be guiding the other prisoners or doing things like that, but he's still a prisoner. So demigods are still prisoners. They're devotees with some sort of desire, mixed desires. And basically, until we become pure devotees of the Lord, we also have mixed desires. We're not demigods. But we also have mixed desires. As Krishna says in the Gita, people come to him, chaturvidha vajanti. People come to him because they want wealth, they're inquisitive, they're looking for knowledge, or they're in distress. So we have, it's just some mixture there. Some mixture. And that's what Krishna means, that there's a mixture.
Okay, and the last question was, I was reading in the Ramayana.
Yeah.
Sorry, in the Mahabharata.
Mahabharata, yeah.
And I found the place where, after the war,
yeah,
the king Yudhishthira and the Kurus dynasty,
yeah,
they welcomed the Brahmanas. The ceremony came.
Yeah,
Brahmanas, they bring the priests, each and every kind of classes,
Yeah.
But mostly the Brahmanas have been welcomed very well. And Krishna said you must welcome those Brahmanas.
Brahmanas, yes.
Then Krishna feed them, because it's spoken like that, with nice milk, vegetable,
very nice,
meat, and pork. So I was confused.
Pork?
Yes, I was a little bit confused.
Well, they weren't Muslims. Because Muslims don't eat pork. Anyway, so let me explain something about the Mahabharata. That's interesting. Shripad Madhvacharya, who is a great acharya in our disciplic succession, explain that the present versions of the Mahabharata that we have nowadays have been corrupted. And the modern, let's say, Vedic scholars, if you can use that word, modern Vedic scholars who are trying to come up with the actual original edition of what's called the critical edition. There's this, in scholarship, there's something called the critical edition of a particular book. Just like if you're studying Shakespeare, there may be a little different versions of Shakespeare or even the Bible or whatever it is, or different books of the Bible. So they study all these different versions. There's something like 84 different versions in the Mahabharata. And some of those versions are different as far as details, like you're talking about, are concerned. Some of them... Yeah, some of them actually... like there's one story that I'm familiar with in the North Indian version of the Mahabharata. You have the marriage of the exchange of Parashara Muni and Satyavati, in which Vyasadeva was born. It happens on an island. This is the most popular version because it's quite interesting to people. It's quite a common version. Where they're in a boat, he creates a fog, and they go on an island, and Vyasadeva is born. It's pretty romantic. And in the South Indian version, one of the South Indian versions of the Mahabharata, there's an actual, he proposes, they have a fire sacrifice, everything is kosher, as they say. I hate to use that word. Everything is pukka, everything is proper, and then they have a nice marriage. So, it is my belief that that is something that was added later on. Like that, there's something about, and you'll find, yes, Madhvacharya stated that Mahabharata has been corrupted. Not that the story is different, there's the Pandavas, there's Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra, of course Krishna, but the Mahabharata actually was an oral tradition, like a story. Something that was spoken, and when you speak something enough times, details do tend to change. It's a story, basically a story. Of course, the original 4 Vedas, we have them more or less in their intact state, because when they were passed down from spiritual master to disciple, they had to be remembered verbatim. There's this word verbatim, means every word had to be remembered. The rhythm in which they were chanted had to be remembered. The tune in which they were chanted had to be remembered from guru to disciple. So that's why we have the Mahabharata with this interesting stories like that. And I don't believe they fell in pork. It's just like... It goes against my understanding of the culture. They're chasing around pigs and catching pigs and feeding them pork. It just didn't happen. There's one incident where Viswamitra Muni almost eats the back portion of a dog. That's because there was a drought. There was a drought and there was nothing for anyone to eat. So anyway, there's an interesting story that's also in the Mahabharata. Maybe the Ramayana too. So, but no, they wouldn't feed pigs. Whew. Oh my God. Yeah, so there's all sorts of stories there. So that's why when there's some contradiction between the Mahabharata story and the Bhagavatam story, we always take the Bhagavatam.
The Bhagavatam was those 3 steps of worshipping Krishna: Vedic, Tantric, and mixed one.
Yeah. And so the Bhagavatam has been passed down in disciplic succession, unbroken. And we have commentaries by acharyas, and none of the acharyas say that the Bhagavatam has been corrupted. Some of the other Puranas, yes, because they haven't been passed down in a bona fide chain of disciplic succession. That's why the Bhagavatam is our standard of reference. Thank you. Thank you for the questions. Anybody else have questions? Yes?
Thank you for your lecture.
Thank you.
I want to ask, service, a lot of times we hear this sentence that spiritual life is a marathon, not a sprint.
Oh my God.
I wanted to ask how to practice spiritual life healthy and balanced so we can get the best results out and stay on track whole life.
Marathon sounds pretty scary too. I was thinking of entering a marathon for senior citizens, you know. Someone's been encouraging me. The over 70 marathon, you know. See if I can win. Because I do exercise every day. I think I can win. So, but still, I think I could. Isn't it? I was walking, today we were walking with some young people and I was going a lot faster than they were and they almost had heart attacks. So, a marathon, I would say, better to say devotional service is slow and steady pace rather than a marathon. I mean, marathon, yes, you have to pace yourself, that's true. I have, one of my disciples actually is a famous marathon runner. And he enters all these different marathons, and he has to practice every day, and he has to set his pace. And it's really interesting. I always ask him about his marathons. So the main thing is, yes, set a steady pace, keeping the goal in mind, rather than trying to sprint. And one has to understand what one's steady pace is. It depends on each individual. You know, my steady pace may be different than your steady pace. We spoke about that this morning. Picking a situation in terms of varna and ashram. You know what varna and ashram is, you know, whether one is married, whether it's brahmacharya, whether it's sannyasi, vanaprastha. And varna means basically if you like to do brahminical things, you like to do kshatriya things. You picking an occupation and a status in life so you're really happy. Prabhupada said the duty of the leaders in the Krishna consciousness movement, one duty is to make sure that everyone is happy, jolly, Prabhupada used the word. And that means engaging everyone according to... Prabhupada also said the duty of the spiritual master is to ascertain the psychophysical nature of the disciple and engage them accordingly. Not to try to force a square peg into a round hole or vice versa. And you know, sometimes we hear the word surrender. And sometimes we may find a spiritual master or a spiritual authority trying to use the authority to force us to do something that may not be helpful for our spiritual life. Like, surrender, if you don't listen to me, you are not going back to Godhead. Right? Do what I say, or you're going to spend another birth in this material world rotting in hell. That I do not advise doing. The leaders in the Krishna conscious movement should take the spiritual advancement of the devotees as their first priority, as primary interest, and engage people accordingly. And also we as intelligent individuals, rather than blind followers, should try to understand our psychophysical nature and just gradually proceed in devotional service. Not try to jump too high. Prabhupada gave us a poem one time. Big, big monkey, big, big belly, Salem jumping melancholy. What that means is that if you try to imitate Hanuman, and you may have a big, I guess, belly. I guess Hanuman had a big belly, who knows. But anyway, you may try to jump to Sri Lanka, or Ceylon, as it's known or was known. You'll just fall on your face. So one has to know what their strength is. Just like in a marathon, you have to know what your strength is. I mean, how fast you can go in the marathon. You can't just try to sprint through the whole thing. You'll just end up killing it. Actually, I asked this disciple, does people die during marathons? And he said, yes. People actually die during marathons. Heart attacks. He said, young people actually die because they push themselves too much. So you don't want to die becoming Krishna conscious. That would be a mistake. So, yeah, so pace yourself. It's very important. Don't, just be happy. You know, we want to see all the devotees who are smiling. Not like, come to the morning program and it's, oh, samsara, dava, loka. It's like a funeral march, basically. Of course, you're not here, everyone's blissful, but you know, sometimes you see like that, everyone, or they're sitting in Bhagavatam class or Gita class and falling asleep. You know, so mitjahara viharasya, Krishna says in the Gita. Moderate in one's eating, in one's sleeping, like bodily activities. Yes, question.
I hope it's not challenging.
I hope not.
I don't have this intention, but it's kind of thing that's going on. If you can say something in favor of this pragmatical veganism that's going around our leaders in Easton, because apparently our Acharya didn't show with at that time with his example. But no, if in terms of this high principle, which the lecture was about, if you can, in terms of this theme, say something about this veganism, if you can, please.
Okay, I'll say something about it without getting in trouble. So, try not to get in trouble. So, Srila Prabhupada ultimately wanted us to have farms where we would actually have our own cows, and I agree 100% that milk and the ingredients in milk are essential for one's brain substance. Myself, I understand that, even though I'm a vegan, I've lost my brain. Oh, no, I haven't. No, even though I'm a vegan, I take supplements to make up for not taking milk, because I'm aware of which ingredients are there, such as vitamin B12. I mean, I can get into the details in that. So I do take some supplements. Prabhupada did expect that we would have these farms and be able to do this. On a personal basis, which has nothing to do with the philosophy and Krishna consciousness, my feelings, emotions, are there to such an extent that I do not want to be taking something that is a product of violence because it would cause me pain. And that's why I'm a vegan. Not because of not following Prabhupada, or not because it's a religious sentiment of mine, or not because of a philosophical stance, but because it's my emotions. You can't argue someone out of your emotions. Yeah. So, but Prabhupada didn't prohibit it. Prabhupada actually one time said, and this is going to be a shock to all you, there was one devotee who was just eating raw food. Prabhupada said, that's the best diet, but no one will do it. So, follow the best diet, all of you. We'll save money. So anyway, the Prabhupada did not prohibit it. These are just details. And Prabhupada respected very much someone's feelings. Someone loves, I worked with cows before. I milk cows. Not now. I'm traveling too much. Cows will not come with me in the airplane. So I have a great love for cows, feeling for cows, connection with cows. Krishna has a great connection with cows. So for me, it's primarily an emotional point. It's like telling someone not to love someone else. They probably didn't love that person, so why should you love that person? That's all. I mean, and that's a standard answer I give when someone asks me why I'm a vegan, because I cannot emotionally deal with doing something that harms something or someone that I'm deeply in love with, the cow. And that's why I originally became a vegetarian. Not, I was taking milk in the beginning, because someone revealed to me that meat came from animals. When you're raised in the city, it doesn't strike you all the time. You think that meat comes from the supermarket. So as soon as I realized it, then I just gave it up. So I think, it's... Anyway, I'm not going to criticize someone drinking milk or someone not drinking milk. That's up to their own perspective on life. That everybody has their perspective. But that's my perspective, my emotions. You can't argue with emotions. See, that ends the argument.
You're right.
Isn't it? It's like arguing. It says, someone says, I like pizza. How can you argue with that? But that's true. It's not only an argument to defeat what you just said, but it's actually a fact. I do love cows.
No, I'm on your side.
It's not sides. It's not sides. All I'm doing is explaining why I'm not taking sides on this issue. But to me, it's an important principle in my life. And if someone doesn't have it as important, that's their prerogative. That's their prerogative. It's just, to me, I see cows in my mind. I dream of cows at night. Probably become a cow, like Bart Marsby. They're just so wonderful creatures. When I go to Vrindavan, I hug the cows. You took some pictures of me hugging cows, right? In Vrindavan, I hug the cows. I let them lick my head. So I'm in love with cows. What can you do? Sannyasi in love. So, any other questions? Otherwise, I think it's time. Oh, good to see you. Welcome. Nice to see you. Good to see you all. Okay, so we'll see everybody tomorrow morning for Mangalarti. Right and shine. All glories to His divine grace. Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada. Here's all the devotees. See, this is a youth temple. No one's allowed in who's over 30 here in this temple. They have someone checking identification at the door.